Wanted today to give an opportunity, and Representative Kern, if I can get you up here, please. Wanted today to give an opportunity for some of our lawmakers to come and share about important bills that are key to them. They're hot button bills, something they're specializing in, something they're trying to get accomplished during this session. And it should be a very educational thing for us. What we'll do is we'll let all four of them talk first, and we'll do questions after that. Anyway, we really appreciate today. We have Lewis Moore here representing the Arcadia area. We have Tom Newell, the Seminole area. Bobby Cleveland, the most weird area you've ever seen. You talk about gerrymandered. It looks like a pretzel, a square, a 45 angled pretzel is what his district looks like. But Purcell is a little part of it, okay? And then we have State Representative Sally Kern, which is basically Bethany and in kind of that area. So I've asked each one of them to come. So I'll start with Bobby here today, and Representative Cleveland, if you want to come down here. One of the things that Representative Cleveland has been asked to do is be the chairman of the corrections public safety. And Bobby has a significant prison in his district, and it's the assessment center. I guess all prisoners are checked in there maybe before they go to their final prison or something of that nature. One of the biggest issues this session, highest priorities, will be what to do with prison overcrowding. And generally speaking, Republicans, conservatives are quite willing to lock them up and forget about them, throw away the key. But if there are better ways to do this in some situations, there's some people just need to be locked up forever, but there are others that maybe do not. So I've asked Bobby to come. This is his hot button issue. And so if you would take about 10 minutes to educate us on the situation and maybe what some of your ideas are to fix that. Representative Cleveland.
Thank you, Charlie. Please sit down or stand up?
Just stand right there.
When I got elected, my choice wasn't going to be prisons and have anything to do with the prisons, because I basically felt like a lot of you do. We lock them up and throw away the key. I didn't care whether they had air conditioner. I didn't really care. Just put them up there and leave them. After I got put onto the Public Safety Committee, I started visiting all the prisons. And every Friday now for 2 years, I've gone to a different prison. And I found out, at first, my visit was all about trying to find ways to save money, which I was able to do that. DOC just didn't listen to me. But I found a good way that we could save money by the way that we're purchasing food. The Department of Corrections is an agency that ever since the Democrats have been in charge for the last 90 years, when it come to funding, they never funded them. They just gave them a little bit of money. Well, when the Republicans got in, we did the same thing. We're not funding them correctly either. So we're not any different than the Democrats when it comes to funding Department of Corrections. That's why we're in the mess we're in. But I started going to the cells, walking down the lines and talking to different people, asking them why they were incarcerated. And guys would be telling me, what they did wrong, and most of them didn't do anything wrong. They just framed.
They were innocent, right?
Some of them you'll find once in a while they'll admit they actually committed the crime, but most of them were set up. He didn't mean to burn the building down after he robbed it. That's the kind of stories you get. But we got a problem with the mental health, substance abuse people. We're locking up people that have never harmed us, didn't commit a violent crime, and so I started paying attention to that when I started going through there and talking to those guys, and they seemed like they were really different than the guys over here that really done something. And then I was sitting in Sunday school class, and the Sunday school teacher was giving us a lesson. It's in Proverbs, and so you do like you do many times. You kind of start looking for other verses. You're looking at things to read. And all of a sudden I seen a verse that just, it looked like it was 20 foot tall. It says, as Christians, it's our obligation to help people who can't help themselves. And I got to thinking about that's what's happening here with our mental health. We don't have a place to put these guys. And if they're on their medicine, they're fine. But if they get off their medicine, they're not so fine. And so the more I talk to these people, I met a young man who got 2-year sentence, and this is all he had. Now you hear DAs will say, and they are true about 99% of the time, that a person has to work their way to prison. They get to do a lot of different things. You'll hear a guy say, well, all I was doing was smoking marijuana and they caught me and I'm in here. But he also didn't tell you about he robbed and everything else he did before that. But this particular person, and I checked his record so I know it's factual. He was incarcerated. He had robbed his grandmother's, he had schizophrenia. And he had robbed his grandmother's house, stole some stuff, took it and pawned it. That's what he did. That's all the kid's done wrong. He's 19 years old. He got 2 years for that. And so I was talking to the doctor who meets with me. And I asked the doctor, I said, what do you think about this guy? Would you be afraid if you lived next door to him? Absolutely not. As long as he's on his medicine, he's fine. So basically what I'm saying is it's cheaper for us, the state of Oklahoma, to pay for their medicine and give it to them than it is to incarcerate them. It costs us $25,000 a year. We got drug courts. We got a mental health substance abuse court called the Animate Bride Court. I've been to these courts. I've watched people go through it, and they work. Now, do some people fail? Yes, they do. It's not 100%. But it costs us $5,000 a person to go through the mental health, substance abuse, or the drug court. $5,000. It costs us $25,000 to put that same person in the prison. Now, which one makes more sense? The $5,000, he can keep a job, or she. They're a productive citizen, paying taxes. Their kids stay out of DHS. It's just a long line there that we're doing there. But we need to put the people in, if they're picked up for, they got drug problems, and we can get them off of it, we need to put them in drug court. And try to get them off. But it's like anything else, you got to want it too. I mean, you can go to drug court all day long, but if you don't want to get off of it, you're not going to get off of it. A couple of weeks ago, a lady came by my office. She told me a story about her brother. This is a great example. She said her brother, when he was in high school, smoked marijuana, did some other drugs. When he got out, this was in the 80s, 90s, early 90s when he graduated. He gets out, he's still doing the same thing, the drugs. He had a real good job at a golf course in Texas, the superintendent of one of the largest golf courses, working long hours. He started taking more drugs to stay awake so he could do a better job. So he's going through this. He's taking meth, heroin. He's doing everything. He's driving through Oklahoma. He gets picked up, put in jail for 45 days. He's got a choice. You either go to drug court or you go into prison. He chose drug court. Now, for 8 years, he's drug-free. He said he was so glad he drove through Oklahoma. He wanted off drugs. He didn't want on drugs. He fought it, but he couldn't keep from it. But for 8 years, he's been off drugs. And he went through all the way from 10th grade to high school, on up until another 10 years in his life on drugs. So now he's drug-free. He got that by going through drug court. And I can give you more and more of these type of stories. And obviously, there's some guys that fail. It doesn't work for everybody. But if you fail drug court, you do go to prison. Drug court don't mess with you. You follow the orders. You get drug tested every time. They work you. Going to drug court is not an easy deal for anybody to go through. For 1 month, 1 year, he went every day. Every day, he had to do this. And sometimes, some of them just go once a week, maybe sometimes twice a month. Everybody's different how they do. But I'm saying and advocating that we need to spend money on drug courts to help the guys with the mental health, the substance abuse problem, rather than incarcerate them. they've never committed a violent crime. They've never hurt a person at all. But we got them in our prison system. And we're locking up people that we're not afraid of. And right now we've got 28,000 people in our people incarcerated. Out of that 28,000, one half are in there for nonviolent crimes. Out of that one half, 6,000 are there for mental health substance abuse. Think of the millions of dollars times 25 we could be saving a year if we could come up with, keep these guys in drug court. Is that it?
Yeah.
And I thank you for inviting me. I'll answer any questions afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, our next speaker is State Representative Sally Kern.
All right. Well, I've been known to press a few hot-button issues and get in trouble with the media from time to time, and I try to base that upon a statement that Thomas Jefferson said. He said, in matters of dress, go with the flow. In matters of principle, stand like a rock. And so I've tried to have my 10 years of being a legislator, I have 2 more to go, be based upon standing on the principles of good government, of God's Word, and such. And I've discovered that that rock is a good place to stand, but other people don't like being hit with a rock. So it's been quite an experience. I say that to say this: I will probably get some flack this coming session because I have a couple of bills that I think will really stir up people, and this is the first time they've ever been made public. So if I start getting trouble and flack soon after this, it's all Charlie's fault. But I am introducing a bill called a change therapy bill, and this is a bill that several states have already outlawed there being change therapy in their state. And all change therapy is parental rights, allowing a parent to take their child who's under 18 years of age to a psychologist, a minister, a counselor of some sort who needs some counseling because they are struggling with same-sex attraction. And for those of us who are believers, the gospel is all about change. And we also know that the gospel is about dealing with the sin of our hearts. And there's not a person in the world who's above temptation. And there's nothing wrong with being tempted. It's when you know, the birds can fly around in the air, but when you let them nest in the tree, then that's when you're in trouble. And I believe there are a lot of people who struggle with same-sex attraction. I believe that is something that is a part of our human nature. And I believe that any parent should have the right to take their children who are struggling with this issue to a good counselor and get some counseling on it. I also believe this bill also not only allows the parents that freedom, but the bill also offers protection to those counselors and ministers and whoever else is giving this counseling, giving them the legal right to do this. So that is one bill, and if we're able to get that bill passed, that will be a huge step in thwarting the agenda of those people who are advancing homosexuality in our society. Another bill that I'm introducing, it's called the Preservation of State Sovereignty and Marriage Act. And this is a bill that is going to be reaffirming the fact that 76% of the people of Oklahoma, the voters of Oklahoma, voted in 2004 to define marriage as being between one man and one woman. And as you well know also, the activist courts have been stepping in and violating the Supreme Court's decision a couple of years ago when the Supreme Court said this is a matter up to the states to decide how they want this. And yet activist judges are coming and declaring unconstitutional our amendments defining marriages between one man and one woman. And so what this bill does, it simply, that might be an over-exaggeration, but it simply defunds any state employee or entity, not an agency, but any state employee, someone who's drawing a salary from the state. It will defund them. They will no longer get their salary and so on. And so if they advance giving a marriage license or do anything else to advance same-sex marriage in our state, because our state has declared it unconstitutional. So there are a number of states, Texas and South Carolina have already introduced this bill. I found out last night that there are 9 other states who are looking at doing it. So those are some hot-button issues, to say the least, huh? You know, and be honest with you, if it were up to me, I really wouldn't want to do this. But I believe that marriage is a fundamental part of our society. It is the bedrock institution, and therefore the state is duty bound to uphold the integrity of marriage, natural, traditional marriage. And so I'm going to do it. So you could be praying that these bills will get a hearing and that they will advance. Another bill that I think I'm introducing, I'd like to emphasize think, and I want to make sure that Don, the Baptist over here, hears this. I'm thinking, I haven't completely decided, but introducing the zero common sense bill, which is the bill that if a child is playing at school and goes bang, they cannot be suspended or reprimanded in any way just for being a child. So anyway, it's a good bill, and I will probably do it again, but I'm not totally 100% convinced, so I'll probably get some lobbying from you-know-who over there on that. I also have already introduced, the first bill that I have introduced already is a bill dealing with wiretapping, giving the police the ability to wiretap those people who they think are engaging in human trafficking. I was a little bit leery of this bill when I've discussed with police officers from Oklahoma City and from Tulsa about this, and being pretty much a strict constitutionalist and protecting privacy rights, I was a little hesitant on this at first because I do not want ordinary citizens who have not violated the law and who should not be considered guilty before they've done anything to be have their privacy invaded. And there are there are 4 different protections in this bill to make sure that this bill will only go after those people who they know are already actively engaged in some way in human trafficking. So that's another bill. That's an issue that has become very dear to my heart. And so I have 2 education bills. I'm checking right now to see how much expense they will involve. If they involve a lot of expense, that may doom them from the beginning simply because of the budget crisis that we have this year. But I was talking to my husband last night, and he said, some things are worth it. I personally believe these 2 bills are worth it. One of them is an ELL, English as a, I'm going blank here, English language learner bill. You might know, you might not know that a large segment of our student population in Oklahoma are Hispanics. They do very poorly on the reading test and some other tests. And so it is my feeling that we could get the biggest bang for our buck if we help these English language learning students learn how to read better so that they can take tests better. Their scores will automatically go up, and that will help our scores all across the board. Another one is for the deaf and hard of hearing, and I've worked months on this bill, and that's another segment of our population that needs to be ministered to. So anyway, these are some of my bills, and thank you, Charlie, for the opportunity. I'm going to have to leave early. I told Charlie about this. I'm supposed to go over to El Reno to visit a child advocacy center, and I have to leave a little bit earlier because I realized on the way over here I'm on empty. And so I've got to get to a gas station soon. Thank you. We won't go into that. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker will be Representative Tom Newell. And I've asked Tom to come. By the way, all of these state lawmakers here will be recipients of awards from OCPAC at our awards dinner on the 13th of February. So all of you, I want you to know you're invited along with your spouse, husband in this case, Sally, to be our guest there and to receive your proper awards. But Tom Newell is from the Seminole area. You may not know this. Tom was an economics professor at the junior college there. He's also a minister. And in his teaching there, he always used the book The Law by Frederick Bastiat with his students. So that should tell you he leans a lot closer to the Austrian School of Economics than he does the Keynesian School of Economics. But
I don't even lean towards Keynesian.
Okay, well, good. Thank you. Thank you. And so anyway, Tom has led the charge on a number of fiscal accountability things, and at this point in time, I'll turn it over to you for 10 minutes, Tom, to tell us about your hot button issues.
Thanks, Charlie. You asked me to talk about one issue in general, and as a pastor and politician, I always like to prove that I can keep it under the time limit that you set. So we'll just talk about one. After our president was re-elected, I got a call from a constituent that had a feeling that probably many of you in this room shared. And he just asked me, he said, Tom, he said, I want you to file a secession bill. He said, I know it won't go anywhere, but I think you should just file it, you know, and make a statement that we want to get out of this sorry state of the union that we're in. I want you to think about that. And then how many of your parents had young children at one time? Did you ever have a child when they were young get mad at you and say, I'm just running away from home? And they'd pack a bag, and if you're like me, you probably just said, okay, go right ahead, you know, and let them go because you knew that they couldn't go on. They had no money, no resources, and that they'd come crawling back to you because they were dependent on you. Well, we like to think of ourselves as sovereign and independent states, and in fact, Chief Justice Roberts, in his opinion that none of us liked on the Obamacare, actually had a statement that was very important. He said, the states are independent and sovereign. Sometimes they have to act like it. Well, the reality is that even for those, in fact, it's the most conservative states that are the most dependent upon the federal government. The Council of State Governments, which is not a conservative group, I pulled this out of a magazine about a year ago, and they have a little chart here on federal grants provided to the states, provided one of every $3 in state revenue in 2011. Then they list the states. And Oklahoma was so far up the chart that we're not even on the chart, but in 2011, 50.6% of our state expenditures were federal dollars. Now that was a high year because it was 2010 and we were using a lot of stimulus funds and all of that. But in that same year when so many stimulus funds were going out, Massachusetts, which we would all consider to be a liberal state, only 10.7% of their state expenditures were federal dollars. Then Tax Watch magazine gave us the numbers for 2011. In 2011, when we weren't using all those stimulus dollars anymore, 39% of our expenditures were federal dollars. Still ranked us 14th highest in the country. Now, I mentioned in conservative states, Mississippi was number 1 at 49%. Louisiana was number 2. Georgia was number 9. So you see, all the conservative states that like to say we're conservative are the ones that are most dependent upon federal dollars. And so that's a real problem for us. It's especially a problem for Oklahoma when you factor in something else. And I'm not saying I'm against it, but it's a reality you have to understand. When we look at our gross domestic product in the state, and you look at how much of that is actually federally dependent dollars, for instance, all of our military bases, very important part of our economy, but still directly tied to federal spending and federal dollars. And we all know in this room that the federal government is broke, right? I mean, one of the arguments we hear about getting these federal dollars back is people say, well, it's our money to begin with. No, that's not true. That's right. Again, in Oklahoma, for every dollar we send to the feds, we get back, it depends on the year again, but somewhere around $1.30, $1.38. So we're getting back much more than we're sending up there. Where's that coming from? Well, the Fed's printing it. You know, it's deficit spending. So if we really want to be sovereign and independent, the first thing that we have to do is get a handle on all this federal spending. I filed a bill last year that was dead on arrival that simply said before any agency could apply for a new federal grant, they had to get the approval of the legislature first. That bill never saw the light of day, and it was amazing how many different state agencies were coming to talk to me about, what are you trying to do here? But the bill I'm filing this year was actually a bill that we passed under T.W. Shannon and the governor vetoed, which was a bill that simply said, we want all the state agencies to report to us what their federal spending is, and that bill actually also had a condition that said, well, what will you do if you lose some of that money? That was back when sequestration was being talked about. The governor vetoed it because she said that was her domain to be over the agencies and all of that. I'm refiling the bill this year. We're taking out that most onerous part about tell us your contingency planning, and we're just asking for all the agencies to be transparent. I have high hopes that we can get this through. It's just a first step. Transparency is just the first step, but Utah is actually a couple of years ahead of us. They got the transparency in place, then they did some other steps, and now they're actually spending money to build a contingency plan for their state on kind of how to survive if they lose a lot of federal funding. I think it's very wise planning. There are several states that are doing this. In fact, the State Policy Network is supporting me in this. But when we want to say that we're a federalist country, that we're a union of sovereign independent states, then we need to be sovereign and independent states. I'll close with this, again from Council of State Governments, which maybe they were a little bit more conservative years ago, but this was from 1943. Their executive director at that time said this. He said, because of all the federal dollars we're taking and all that we run the risk of turning the states into mere administrative units of an overall central discretionary government. Now, he warned about that back in 1943. It's about time that we heed that warning and get serious about managing our finances well. So that's what we're going to be doing, and I only spent 6 minutes, so yay me.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, our final lawmaker before we get to the time of Q&A will be Lewis Moore, and Lewis is the chairman of the States' Rights Committee. May have a new name this year, I'm not for sure, but you're continuing on. You've been allowed to continue on as chairman. In fact, that committee has been allowed to continue on, thank God. And so Lewis has been very dedicated to states' rights, and he's very knowledgeable on this issue. So please welcome Lewis Moore here. Lewis, thank you.
Thank you, Kern. And since Tom didn't use all of this time, he said that I could use the rest of his time for him, so thank you very much. Thanks, Tom. Hey, so to piggyback on what Tom was saying, yes, the state does spend more money, but that's because of the military bases, which are in Article 1, Section 8, Institution of Enumerated Power, and the Postal Service, the FAA Center, which we could probably give a pass to, those kind of things, which are big expenditure items. So the federal government spends about $35 billion, or did in 2013, and that's the last year that we really have the really good numbers. In that same year, we sent, as taxpayers and corporations, incorporated persons and businesses, $27.1 billion to the federal government in taxes. We got back $8.2 billion, of which 2.5 of that was straight up borrowed money. So that's not very good. So when the president was saying that we raised the debt limit, but that doesn't necessarily mean we raised the debt. You know, we raised the debt ceiling, but not the debt. That sounded kind of convoluted. Well, they're paying back, the Congress is paying back in arrears the money the states have spent. They're spending the money, and then the federal government is repaying them for the money. So they can guarantee the states are doing their bidding. So they're telling the states what to do with the money. That was our money to begin with. Then they get reimbursed the money, and the cycle just continues to go on. The worst thing about it is, in the case of the Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs, Rita Aragon didn't even know what the 7 different institutions, locations like Claremore and Lawton and Ardmore and such, were doing with the money. And they didn't have to follow the state guidelines as far as going out for bidding and that kind of thing, and that kind of got twisted up. But they don't have to report to their agency heads, some of these people, as to how they're spending the money. And then when somebody gets a grant, that grant money is typically straight up borrowed money. Any new expenditure that you hear about today, raising the ceiling on Medicaid spending, anything like that, according to James Langford and a couple other people that we talked to, that is straight up borrowed money. So that's not going to be a good thing. So when you hear about the politicians in Washington, D.C. saying, you never hear them talk about bringing home the bacon. But when they talked about bringing home the bacon, they were fighting over a certain piece of pie. Now, they don't have to fight over that anymore because they just go to the printing press. The printing press prints off, so everybody's a winner. Everybody brings home the paper bacon now. So that's not very good. So I'm really pleased that Tom's taking that on, and we do have to act like a sovereign state, and we wish that our chief executive officer would do the same thing. That person, if the governor had said to the judge in the court that said that same-sex marriage as a constitutional amendment that we voted on in 2004, I think it was State Question 711, and overwhelmingly passed that, and then to have a federal judge say, you cannot have that, they don't have any right to say that. And if she had just stood up for us and said, hey, you're out of your bailiwick here, this is a constitutional matter for the citizens of the state of Oklahoma only, you know, about face and march out of here, then it would have been, you know, it would have been, it's cut and dry. But now it's all convoluted, and part of that is because her legal counsel, Steve Mullins, believes that the federal courts have more say-so over our state than in that they're the supreme law of the land. And we know that anybody's taking Charlie's test, we know that the Supreme Court is the law of the land. But the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. But he's not the only one that's a little bit confused. In this case with the Attorney General and fighting the state of Colorado, I don't know if there's some other double twist and turn that he's trying to do, but we did talk to him, Mike Ritz and myself and Mike Christian, talked to them and their staff, and they really do believe, you know, their staffers really believe that the Supreme Court and the federal judges are the supreme law of the land, and that's not a good thing, because he's too good an Attorney General to let slide off that direction. So he does need to have some people shore him up. So we're gonna do our best to help him in that area. The one bill that I have that is going to be interesting. It's a Constitution Security Act, and it's emphasized in the 10th Amendment. And it says that the state of Oklahoma is directed to intercede on behalf of all Oklahoma citizens and businesses. Really, what the state senator or U.S. senators are supposed to be doing. But on any federal action outside of the enumerated powers that's written in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. So any federal action, like they want our DEQ to do the bidding of the EPA. And sometimes they give them money, sometimes they don't. They just tell them what they want to do. So same thing with the Fish and Wildlife on things like the lesser prairie chicken and that kind of thing. So if they want to do that, those agencies would be directed not to do it, but that action needs to go through the state legislature for approval, and thus it would meet File 13 in most people's cases, and nothing would happen, especially if it's not an enumerated power. Then, if somebody like the IRS wanted to come and take direct action, something that's not an enumerated power, and they wanted to come harm, you take away your business, your home, your bank account, and that's a federal institution. As far as I know, the 16th Amendment doesn't include the IRS. It just says there's a direct tax, which the Constitution forbid from happening earlier, okay, until that December 24th, Christmas Eve
Fateful day.
deal. Okay, so if the IRS wanted to do that, we would direct them to the Attorney General's. That's an action against a state citizen's business or their home. They would go line up at the Attorney General's office. We wouldn't give the Attorney General any more money. We wouldn't give any more staff. You might be one of 2,000 people that they want to come see. Get in line, and we'll get to it. And but that's the main thing, you know, to try to protect us. And then we want to do a study in another bill. We tried to run this a couple of years ago, and that was to have the Oklahoma Tax Commission collect all monies that would otherwise go to the federal government in the form of income taxes. So payroll taxes, individual income taxes, corporation, corporate income taxes, that kind of thing. And I talked to Tony Maston, the head of the Tax Commission, and he said he could pull it off. He could do it. You know, frankly, the federal government should not be worried about how they get the money or who collects the money, but it should be worried about making sure they got enough money. And frankly, right now, not only do they have enough money, they've got record taxes. If you hear them bragging about they've had record receipts, right? Well, they had record receipts before what just went down on January 2015. You know how laws take effect, normally in Oklahoma they take effect the 1st of November. Well, these are taking effect the 1st of January, the top Medicare tax went from 1.45% to 2.35%. The top income tax bracket went from 35% to 39.6%. The top income payroll tax went from 37.4% to 52.2%. Capital gains tax went from 15 to 28%. Dividend tax went from 15 to 39.6%. Estate tax went from 0 to 55%. That little jewel right there is on behalf of the life insurance industry, and who used to be the head of the Life Insurance Council up there in Washington, D.C.? Frank Key. And I don't think he is anymore. I think so that's not very good. So that was something that the Democrat majority, House and Senate and the President got passed. So I know it's past Christmas, but Merry Christmas. And that's not very good. They got a little piece of everybody on that deal. So while we're bickering about our 5.25%, which was 0%, they're getting massive amounts of money. So it's going to be a real chore. We're going to do the best that we can. We appreciate your efforts, and these guys all send out emails and things, and if you do want to be included, because I don't know everybody's email address, please let Charlie know, and we'll get that information to you. And Ralph, your son said in Sunday school class this past Sunday that never do wrong to do right. And that's what he told James Langford. You know, never do wrong to do right. So I said, you know, I'm going to remember that. So that's what I'm telling you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louis.
Actually, a statement and 2 questions, if I could be kind of brief. Representative Newell, on your whole research there about taxes and going to the federal government coming back, the whole idea of we send $1, get back $1.38, when you factor in the idea of how much is paid on interest to our debt, because in the system we have a fractional reserve bank and the Federal Reserve, and that whole, it's just how it's rigged. All the power is actually in that private institution. And that's what I would dare say is gluing us. In reality, when you consider the consequence of interest on that artificial shell game of a debt, we're paying our room bills. All right, I bet you factor that in, you'd see that. And to approach debt from that angle and to observe that and make people aware of that, that's the glue that's forcing us, so to speak. Not that I'm for secession. I don't think we need to be there yet. But on the other hand, that whole issue, please be aware of it. Representative Moore, just a quick question. On the whole issue of federal agencies like the EPA, offering grants or whatever to our state, and then let's say you have an agency that takes the grant anyway. Are there consequences in the bill for agencies or individuals who take the grants without going through the legislative approval process?
Right now there's not, but since you said that, I'll look at putting something in there, and our OMAS, Oklahoma Office of Management Enterprise Services, Preston Dorflinger, we suggested that he put a PIN number on all those monies so we could track all those monies, but we do need to stop them cold from getting that. And I think that in some of the things that we're researching on the Oklahoma State Constitution, that would be illegal for them to do.
Great, okay. You know, bill without consequences, little value, right?
Yeah.
Representative Cleveland, thank you so much for your efforts on the issue of the prisons. One question for you, and I noticed you're looking at the financials in the whole bit, and it's obviously valuable to do so, no problem there at all. I wonder about the idea, though, now the libertarian wing, so to speak, of the liberty movement, you know, way out there to that one edge. They'll bring out the idea that drugs shouldn't be illegal at all, and I wonder the idea of arresting somebody at all for smoking marijuana. Well, I don't endorse it one bit. Don't get me wrong, folks. Okay.
Sure.
Although that stuff from Colorado I hear is great. I wonder to deal with the efficiencies and costs that actually what's best for society. What about that question of just not criminalizing that at all?
Well, you know, I get that question quite a bit. If we're going to go there, why don't we just legalize prostitution? Let's just take everything legal. Just don't have any rules. Let's live a free life.
You can't do that, Representative. That's going to an extreme I never intended.
I understand, but I get that question a lot. But that's That's kind of the way I answered. I'm not just telling you, I get that a lot. Let's just legalize marijuana. But marijuana is illegal, period. So, you just got to follow the law.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
Being somewhat of a coward, I'll wait till Representative Kern left before I made my comment. But my question to her would have been, what percentage of children are born with ambivalent genitalia? Meaning you can't tell whether they're a boy or a girl. I worked in the medical field up at Lutheran General Hospital in Illinois in radiation oncology, and the answer is about 2%. I think that if children can be messed up that much on the outside, I don't know, I didn't really make a conscious choice between boys and girls. It kind of came to me in a dream, you might say. But I think this battle about marriage is about money and rights, inheritance and what have you. I think that there should be a separate thing. Call it something besides marriage. I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, is for a defined purpose of raising children. If we're going to give marriage rights to people, we should define why we're giving it to them. If it's just because they're a couple, then there's another thing. So we need to, I think, has any of the representatives considered an alternative, a civil union or something, whatever you want to call it, to replace marriage so that these people can get the same fair legal treatment that married couples get, unless we want to say we're going to pay married couples for being married for 10 years or 20 years and raising their children as a couple so that we have a financial benefit to society.
Anybody want to comment on that? That's for Newell.
You made some good points. I think that was part of the argument previous. I think the argument now is looking more of just taking the state out of the marriage thing completely is one of the arguments now. And of course, then you would have to come back to some type of contractual law thing for passing down property and all that kind of stuff.
Tom, could I? Sure. May I have it? I'm not a lawmaker, but I'm going to make some comments on this. Several years ago, it was actually then State Representative Bill Graves that brought a sociologist to speak in Oklahoma City. Dr. Paul Cameron was his name. And he brought up something that was really, really interesting. Intact families, husband, wife, children, strong families, cost society almost nothing. They don't produce the problems for society. What they do is pay the bills in society. And so he suggested this thought, and I just leave it here for any of you to think about. We have people who drive all the way across town to get a discount on some product that's advertised somewhere. And so we're highly motivated for savings. Why not give a 1% tax reduction for every year you're married in the state of Oklahoma?
I think someone had a bill kind of like that last year.
Did they? Was that you, Tom? Okay.
It wasn't exactly that, but it was.
Yeah.
For somebody who's you're married.
So if you married 10 years, you get a 10% tax deduction. If you married 20, you get a 20% tax deduction. And if you know, and what brought that up? You said, why not pay people for this? Now, you don't even have to have civil unions for two people to live together and contract the property and things like that. You can contract that. But anyway, those are just some things. And Sally's a little bit like me when I wrote that controversial thing recently and then left the country, so I didn't have to deal with the aftermath. Sally threw some things out and left today, so she didn't have to answer it. All right, next question here.
Yeah, well, Sally's gone, but I'll call her later.
Right in front of the mic. Right in front of the mic. Get up to the mic. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not used to having to use a microphone. I'm a basketball official.
Yes.
So everybody hears me in the stadium.
Eat the mic.
So, let's see, Sally's gone. I'll call her later because mine's a pretty cut and dried question for her. But Mr. Cleveland,
A lot of what you said I do agree with. Is I used to be in law enforcement, and I've seen both sides of this. But my simple question is, did they break the law first? Did they break the law as a reason that they got in trouble?
They sure did. They broke the law.
Okay, is there any consequence? Is there any consequence before going to the drug court?
Is there any consequence
Yeah, any
before?
consequence, monetary, time served, whatever. Do they have to do any consequence before they have that drug court?
You get a choice. You either go to prison or you go to drug court. Once you get that far.
Right. Okay. Okay, I thought that's what you said, but I just wanted to clarify. Okay. Now, Brother Tom, you deal with you deal with the money. I love that. I mean, y'all, all three of y'all, great guys. I love y'all. But is there any kind of serious consideration out there amongst your brethren about going to a zero-based budget for departments?
When you say brethren, those of us would love to do that. Do we have a majority that would do that? No,
yes.
We don't have a majority that would do that.
Okay, that was my question. And then, Lewis, do you have enough support out there for your 10th Amendment bill? Because I think that's just a capital idea. Do you have the support for that 10th Amendment bill, or do you need help lobbying people?
We do need help. When we went to the ALEC conference, the American Legislative Exchange Council, a number of people from a number of states liked the idea. But do enough people in any state like the idea in order to even get it heard? We'll get it heard in the committee. It'll. Yeah. That's why we fight for that. And that's why we're thrilled to have more people and the new freshman legislators that we've got, and some of that left the House, conservative guys like Marty Quinn and stuff that went to the Senate. We think we're going to have more support. Do we have enough to even have it heard on the floor? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But so I'd have to say no.
Okay, but
so I'd say we do need help
okay.
Out there to get people to hear this bill.
Okay, because I love to lobby and twist arms, and that's why I said.
That's it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mike?
Yes, gentlemen. My name's Michael Pearson. I'm County Commissioner in Logan County, District 2. That's the eastern portion.
Stay right in the mic. Right in the mic.
That's the eastern portion of the county. Maybe we can get it a little up here, or maybe I can squat down a little bit. Regardless, I believe it was 2006, House Bill 1176 was passed, creating county improvement roads and bridges. It started in 2007, taking a portion of the vehicle tax collections and putting it into a fund that's administered by ODOT that is then distributed according to how the circuit engineering districts are able to get it and put it on projects. Currently, I have a $4 million project over on Luther Road. I could use more. Originally, it was 10 miles, then it went down to 6 miles, then it went down to 5 miles. Now I'm down to 3. Okay, I have a bridge that I had, because I didn't have enough money, I had a guy that could do all the work on it, a little bit on top of us, but it would have cost me in the neighborhood of $40,000. So now I've gone through SERB, and because of all the requirements, it is now going to cost somewhere around $200,000 to $250,000. Okay, so now I'm hearing from the Hill that we need this money for education. Now Bobby's, well, I don't know if it's Bobby Cleveland, but we're also needing more money for our prisons, et cetera, et cetera. And who is it, former OSU head, now Senator Halligan is, I heard it directly from his mouth, he's looking at our SERB money to go on to that. We don't have enough as it is, but we are striving to do things. For instance, Logan County has, for the first time in history, passed a sales tax. It's going to go directly to roads. We would like to see this in-state money go to the counties directly instead of being administered through ODOT, using federal standards, I might add, that they're required to do in order to be able to get the federal monies. And one of the things I'm seeing when it comes to a problem, when it comes to getting money, the federal money, a major part of it, all you have to do is look at Norman, Bricktown, the new railroad station, all the work that Edmund is doing, and you can see that they are extremely dependent upon federal monies. In fact, here shortly, we're going to be going to a roundtable there at ACOG to figure out how to do our 5-year plan, what projects we're going to do for that. And I am hoping that I'm able to extend my Luther project at least another 2 miles in order to be able to using money coming from that federal government. So what my problem is, and then I also have a statement, but what my problem is you know, I want the money to come here. I don't want to go to the feds for money, all right? And so how, you know, I'm doing my best to get the money coming from Logan County or from the state, but we need to somehow help that out. So if you could comment, I appreciate it.
For one, I think that we ought to probably start with keeping the federal gas tax money in Oklahoma and not sending it up to Washington, D.C. Where if you look at how they spend their money, we sent them $27 billion. According to 4 of the congressmen that we spoke with last year, between 30 and 70 cents out of every dollar we sent them, they spent in overhead or administrative expenses. So if we want more gas tax money to go to projects here, we just simply keep the money. And then our expenses are much less. A state employee cost about 1/3 of what a federal employee costs. So we just keep more of that money here. The other thing that I might suggest is that we get together with because you have a number of people that live in Logan County that work in Oklahoma City.
Yes.
Okay, so what they did with some of the MAP tax money is they spread that out to the suburban areas around it, but yet in Oklahoma County, because their people worked in Oklahoma City and left tax dollars there, and the same thing with you. So you need to get in that discussion there as well. And then I don't know if you make money off of water, but and I don't think you do, but I don't know about sewage treatment and that kind of thing. There are some other ideas that I've talked to Jason Murphy about to try to generate more revenue, because I know that you guys do need that.
Yeah, that's federal, Rural Water District 1 and 2.
Yes. Thank you.
Let me just point out that some of our colleagues are falling all over themselves to say they're going to give more money to education, and then because they know of the budget constraints, trying to figure out where that money is going to come from. I'm not one of those ones that is politically correct that says we need to give more money to education, first of all. In fact, I think Representative Nelson's going to be here maybe in a couple of weeks to talk about education savings accounts, which introduces free market principles into education. But I would say that there's enough county commissioners that can speak to their educators, that you can or speak to their legislators, that keep that fund from being raided. And I would just encourage you and all your colleagues to do that.
Okay, David, last question.
Oh, can I make a statement to Bobby?
Okay, quick, very quick.
Okay. I suggest to you that marijuana was made a Schedule 1 in 1970. There was a commission put together, headed up by Raymond P. Schaefer, former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, who made a report on marijuana misunderstanding. Unfortunately, our wonderful president, Richard Nixon, was totally against that because he needed some kind of weapon against the anti-war leftists. Thank you.
Okay.
This is the Republican Party platform. It says right here in Statement of Principles, we believe in limited government, individual liberty, and personal moral responsibility. Since you all have taken control of the House and the Senate and the governorship, you've increased spending over $1 billion. So how does that give any sign that y'all are being personally responsible with our money?
Right in the mic.
And why don't you just go back to the budget when the Democrats were in power? Save us $1 billion. Give it back to the people.
All right, so the state budget, of all the money that is spent, we appropriated $7.1 billion last year. This year it looks like about $6.8 billion. But the entire spend of the state government was 18-something billion dollars. So how do we get to 18, but yet we only appropriated 7.1? That's where we're seeing the growth of the $1 billion. And it's every year it's a little bit more because people ask for grants, and the federal money I think is the biggest portion of that increase. Now, so you have the 7.1, you got the 8.2 that came back to state entities to the federal government, and then you have fees. And that fees was worth about $3 billion. So if more people did more things that fees were charged for, then they probably ended up spending that money. Or there may have been a few fees that were increased. But of the 7.1, very, very few things got an increase, if any at all. So where do you see the growth then? You see the growth in the 8.2, the money that came back from the federal government directly to state agencies. That's where we're trying to get it pinned down because we don't have control over that at all.
Okay,
Let me just say, and also a huge part of that growth has been Medicaid spending. And one of the problems we have as the Republicans is that limited government doesn't mean no government. So there are core functions of government. The Democrat budget, for instance, for decades had starved roads and bridges. So Republicans did the right thing in saying we're going to prioritize that and say yes to that and give more money to that. The only problem is that politicians in general just have a hard time saying no to anything. So while we were saying yes to some things, we should have been saying no to others, and we weren't. But a large portion of that is Medicaid spending is killing us, and it's going up every year, and it's going to continue to go up. And until we can get a handle on personal responsibility and some other issues, we're going to continue to have that problem.
I appreciate your question or statement because I think you're right. If you take a look at our spending, I can't see any difference between us and the Democrats in the spending. We've grown government. The problem is we've got so many tax credits. $1 billion that comes off the top of the budget before we get to do our part. But I don't think that we're doing near the job that we should be doing. But I also find out that on the budget, it comes to us the last 2 or 3 days, and we're supposed to sit there and vote on a $6-8 billion budget. Quite frankly, I didn't vote for it because I don't agree with the way it's done, and I don't agree with some. I don't have a choice in saying we shouldn't give money here or there. It's just give me to vote it all or nothing. And I think there's a lot of better ways that we could be doing things. That's a great question.
Yeah. Okay, well. Okay. In closing today, one of our speakers 2 weeks from today will be State Representative Randy Graw. And the issue he will be talking about is changing up to dealing with a budget only in 1 year in that process, and then the next year will be the budget plus other issues. And I don't know how I feel about that. That's the reason I want him to come. I want to learn about that. But most of us believe that there's major problems with our budgeting process in Oklahoma. But just knowing there's problems, I'd like to hear some more substantive ideas and answers as to how to fix that situation there, to be honest with you. So anyway, we'll have Randy Graw, Jason Murphy. I can't remember the other two. They'll be here next week. And we're going to continue it 1 week into that also. So I think this is very valuable. I hope you folks are enjoying it. I'm learning a lot. And anyway, one final thing in closing. Remember, we're going to be having our elections the end of March. And everyone voting those elections will need to be a dues-paying members 2 weeks prior to that Wednesday. So we are taking memberships right now. They're coming in. I appreciate all of your support. 2016 will be the most important election cycle for the state of Oklahoma since 2004. We're going to have a huge changeover, and the good news is, and part of the problem with David, with the question you have, is we don't have a true conservative in the executive branch, and I'm sorry, but the leadership in both the House and the Senate are not particularly conservative. And so when you don't have conservative leadership and they have the ability to block conservatives, it's a problem. But that's why the 2016 elections are so important. And that's why the next president, whomever that might be, probably John, but whomever that might be, is going to need the support of this organization financially and with your efforts, because it is vital. The kind of people we put in office in the state legislature in 2016 will have a large bearing on the direction of this state for many years after that. Because I will tell you this, out of, I think, the 13 Republicans in the House and 12 or so Republicans in the Senate, there probably aren't more than 4 or 5 that are really good. And the rest of them are some of the worst Republicans in there. That's my opinion. I know these guys won't agree with that publicly. But that's my opinion. And so our chances of making improvement are very good. So anyway, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you,
Given what Charlie just said, I just want to let you know that yes, I am running to be the next president of OCPAC here in a few weeks. And I intend to make sure this organization stays relevant and we continue to weed out the right R's from the wrong R's and hold them accountable and get government the heck out of our business and let us run our own lives in accordance with our conscience and God's will for us. Amen to that. So y'all vote.
Amen. All right. I want to thank all these lawmakers for coming so much. And thank you folks for being here today too. We'll see you next week. Thank you.